Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the Egyptian economic performance. This is in light of the Ministry of Finance issuing a report that indicates the success of Egypt's economy and its good performance on all indices. We're going to be focusing on that tonight. But before we start our topic, let's check out some of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi reviewing a number of projects being implemented by the Ministry of Transportation today, especially roads and axes. Now, this came during the President's meeting with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Minister of Transportation Kamel El-Wazir. Presidential spokesman said the meeting tackled the executive implementation of the round road that surrounds the Greater Cairo, which is largely dependent on a number of axes, including expanding the road to be a 7-lane road. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also held a meeting with the Presidential Advisor for Health Affairs, Dr. Mohammed Awad Tageddin, to follow up on the procedures by the government against the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, as well as ongoing vaccination campaigns. During the meeting, President al-Sisi instructed to expand inoculation all over the country and facilitate supplying citizens with different kinds of vaccines, which are all available. The head of state also directed to continue awareness campaigns for all citizens regarding precautionary measures against the infection, especially in density areas and places such as the governmental institutions, schools, universities and hospitals, with the aim of maintaining the government's path to preserve the people's health. Also today, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli presided over a meeting to follow up on the progress of a number of projects implemented by the Armed Forces Engineering Authority. The meeting tackled the progress of Houses for All Egyptians project, part of President al-Sisi's initiative to develop the governorate's capitals and big cities. It was attended by head of the Engineering Authority, General Ihab al-Far, who reviewed the work at the projects to revive Old Cairo. El-Far said the implementation primarily prioritizes 5 main areas: El Hakim Ba'amr Allah Mosque area, South Bab Zuwela, Hart al-Rum and Bab Zuwela, Hussein Mosque area and Darb al-Labana. He reviewed developments with regards to evacuating unpopulated buildings and slums in targeted areas for development. And Foreign Minister Samy reiterated today Egypt's support to the role played by the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in helping refugees. In a video conference address to the first International Ministerial Conference on the UNRWA held in Brussels and co-chaired by Jordan and Sweden, Shukri stressed on the need to furnish sustainable funding to the agency. The top diplomat emphasized that revitalizing the political track of the Palestinian issue is necessary for achieving Palestinian people's aspirations for an independent state and to establish a just, comprehensive and durable peace in the Middle East. These were some of the stories making the news today, but now focusing our attention to tonight's topic. And now, Egypt's economic reform program has proven a success according to the international institutions. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
The Ministry of Finance has issued a report on the most important indicators of the Egyptian economy, as the Egyptian economic reform program has proven its success according to the testimony of major international institutions. According to the report, the results of the economic reform program appeared during the corona pandemic, because of which the major economies of the world were affected. But thanks to the economic reform program, the state was able to support the affected sectors and maintain a positive growth. The ministry published infographics which included the results of the indicators of the Egyptian economy, which exceeded international expectations. Data from the Ministry of Finance showed a decrease in the overall deficit as a percentage of GDP in 2020-2021 to 7.4% compared to 8.7% in 2009 and 2010. It continued to achieve a primary surplus instead of a primary deficit as a percentage of GDP in the 2020-2021 fiscal year to 1.45% instead of minus 2.1%. The data indicated that the amount of public revenues increased more than 4 times, reaching 1,108 billion Egyptian pounds in 2020-2021 instead of 268.1 billion in the previous fiscal year. Also, the amount of public expenditures increased more than 4 times, reaching 1,578 billion Egyptian pounds compared to 366 billion Egyptian pounds in the previous fiscal year. The data also showed a decrease in inflation rate to 4.5%, down from 11.7%. It also indicated a decrease in the debt of public budget agencies as a percentage of GDP, reaching 91% in 2020-21 compared to 79% in the previous fiscal year. Also, the unemployment rate dipped to 7.9% compared to 9% according to the data. The data showed that net foreign reserves recorded $40.6 billion in July of 2021, which covers 7.6 months of imports. Also, the infographics inspected the international acclaim for the continued strong performance of the Egyptian economy and the improvement of its most prominent indicators.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and joining us here tonight in the studio to shed more light on tonight's issue is Dr. Nezar Samy, the technology management consultant and economic expert as well. Dr. Samy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you and good evening, Hani.
Good evening, sir. Dr. Samy, now, first of all, the Egyptian economic performance, as indicated by the World Bank and the reform program that is carried out by Egypt in cooperation with the International Monetary Fund, really has over the past few years shown great success, growth that was not really expected by the international community as a whole, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, over the past couple of years in specific, we've seen all the international economies really having a slump, yet Egypt has showed a lot of progress and actually showed some sort of growth. Now, for the real GDP was forecast for this year to be 4.5, and then it actually reached 5.5, and they're expecting next year to reach 6. How is Egypt now maintaining this sort of progress? And we've seen the rest of the whole world showing some sort of progress as well as they are adapting to life after the pandemic. How are we still maintaining this economic progress?
Well, as you mentioned, and we checked the report before this introduction, there is a great momentum and a great leaping in the performance of the economical situation of Egypt. And let's take it from the original perspective and how did we reach this, because we are right now in the harvesting stage of the development have been taken into consideration for the last like 6 to 7 years. So let's call back to 2016 and the announcements of the Egypt Vision 2030. I'd like to simplify things and see how these are consecutive activities together connected from different multi-stakeholders. Then we are reaching right now this position. It's not like a turn off, turn on switch. Yes. It is a lot of efforts have been conducted in this era. So back to Egypt Vision 2030, it mentioned that it is diversified, competitive, world-class economy based on innovation, knowledge, okay, for better life or for improvement of life of the Egyptian citizens. So when we take all these components together and put them on a looking glass and to see how this is performing, we will see that first place there was a dimension of innovation. So therefore we can list a bunch of movements and a bunch of activities that took place in the last period about innovation and innovative business models. Unclassical, untraditional. In our area we call it disruptive innovation. So how we do very basic things, very elementary, however we are changing the norms of the story. So where there is a component of innovation, and there's a lot of projects we can talk about that, we have the issue of diversity. And which is really a very important part, because when you talk about diversity, this means that it is not only one channelized track for this particular dimension. So we have the dimension of the financial and business market. We have the dimension of health tech, education, even technology, information and communication technology. All of these are in an orchestra of orchestrating their efforts to reach this goal. Still, we are in the beginning, and we are very, very much eager to reach more and more very competitive place in different aspects and different areas. And thanks to the pandemic, where we started to shed the light of the new normal. So where we can tackle about the diversity in different applications, and for instance in the construction business per se and more, we witnessed a lot of openings and inauguration of projects, national-wide projects. All these elements contributed to the success of or the current status that we have, and all the financial institutions, world-class, they mentioned Egypt is moving upwards in the financial indicators, which was a very important part for us, because this is how the world is looking forward to see Egypt in the new position, in the new way.
Yes.
So the issue right now would be, it's about sustainability, continuity, and seeking for the future with multiple diversified activities in that dimension.
Dr. Samy, now before we start talking about the new norm that you've mentioned, now we've discussed before, and we're talking about it again, talking about the Sustainable Development Vision 2030, all the mega national projects, really developing the health sector, the education, renewable energy, the new cities, all of these things, the infrastructure, the transportation. Now, all these things cost a lot of money, so it needed a lot of finance. So naturally, anybody would imagine that we would be suffering because of all the expenses that need to be met to finance all of these projects. Yet, we are witnessing growth and progress economically. How are we balancing this sort of equation?
Wow, very smart question from you, Hani. Thank you very much. Okay, first place, let's put some of the keywords in that direction that solve that problem or that issue. First, the PPP, which is the public-private partnership. So the government, as well as the private sector, business leaders right now in Egypt, they are shaking hands together, hand by hand, to take this dimension or this direction forward. So it is mutual funding, mutual collaboration in this direction. Again, so this is the first keyword, the public-private partnership, and the second one, which is multi-stakeholder engagement. So everybody is contributing to such a level of development. The third component is about diversity. So in this case, there are multiple different type of funding and funding resources. Funding instruments from different, like could be treasury bonds issued by the central banks, some of the grants from world-class institutions supporting like green projects and renewable energy projects. So there are a lot of them right now focusing on Egypt as a land of great potential. Okay, business leaders as well. So all of these instruments are connected together in a such way that it facilitates the funding and financials for this. Also, the collaboration, the international collaborations. For instance, right now we witness, like Egypt in the last period, built a very strong network of collaborators in different countries, diversifying the interests, diversifying the resources from each and every country, from the east to the west to the Europe and the west. All of them shaking hands together. They have a strong belief in Egypt vision and the strong belief on the Egyptian leadership in this direction. Therefore, they put hands together and they started to finance and to inject all of the contributions that helped into moving to solve this, you can see it like a challenge, but yet it is doable and it is fantastically done.
Yes. Well, the PPP, the public-private partnership, it has already been taking place, and a couple of days ago, the government has also been talking about laws and amendments to really help the private sector have a bigger share and a bigger role to play in the utilities and services sector. Does this mean that now the government will be even pushing the private sector further to have a bigger part to play within the Egyptian economy, to not just settle for the current PPP, but even be more of a driven by the private sector?
Definitely yes. And the key word in this area is creating environment of trust. And the rest or the set of new regulations and laws being injected even in the taxation system right now. As you know, that in the Egypt market we have 6 players in this, for innocent way. We have the Egyptians, either individuals or corporates. We have the Arabs, individuals and corporates, and we have the foreigners, individuals and corporates. So having tax exemption from all these type of stakeholders helped to create an environment of trust for those people to invest it, to come and to put their money even in the the Egyptian stock exchange market. Maybe the rest, which is the individual Egyptians, not yet have been, they received like 10% tax yet. It is very good promising. So the first of the 5 pillars or the 5 key stakeholders are already exempted. So this is now doing the business in a very different way rather than the very normal classical way of doing things. And therefore, there is a great support for the private sector to take its real role for economic development, because the role of the government is the enabler. The role of the government is not just to build up or to compete with the private sector, not at all. No, but the role of the government is to enable the working environment, is to facilitate, being the player or the facilitator for whatever resources are needed to move into this development stage. And the last is to take the hardest or the tough way forward on its shoulders. For instance, taking those projects that nobody in the private sector will take the emphasis to move into it. So this is the hard, tough way. So this is the role of the government to go and to to establish the way and then invite the private sector to come in. So if the answer is yes, how we can create an environment of trust to attract more and more people. And thanks for instance for this economic indicators worldwide witnessed by Morgan Stanley, Fitch, Moody's, the World Bank and all other IMF and all these type of indicators that shows that will show that how Egypt is progressing in that dimension.
Well, talking about the government being an enabler and really driving the private sector or linking the private sector and the industries, the local industries here in Egypt with the international partners. We've seen Foreign Minister Samy going to France, meeting heads and representatives of 90 companies. We've also seen him going to the US, meeting with the Secretary of State Antony Blinken and meeting many heads and presidents of American companies. And quite recently, we've seen President Sisi meeting head of the European Council, and they've tied 500 million euros to the Egyptian economy and investments here in Egypt. Now, if we're getting all these sort of investments and all these sort of potential projects and means of cooperation between all of these, I mean, we're talking about France, the United States, the European Council, these are the heavyweights. How are we going to direct or allocate the funding or investments to which sectors? What are the Egyptian priorities in terms of investment and cooperation with the international community?
Okay. Shall I tell you the secret in this word? Which is decent life. You know, Haya Karima?
Yes.
So, decent life, not just only the underserved villages or the rural areas, but the decent life for each and every Egyptian citizen in the new building, the new republic. So, we have multiple parallel tracks where those type of investments are going to take part of it. Starting from the basic infrastructure needed for being one of the world-class competitive economies. So infrastructure in terms of roads, railway network, airports, fleet management systems, logistics, harbors, all of these activities is part of the pillars. Come up with a more layer about health systems and health insurance, moving into the general health insurance system for the Egyptians. Another part will be in the area of information and communication technology and putting Egypt as a hub for technological development. And we saw this, the secured center for smart cards openings. The renewable energy and climate issues is on the top. So healthcare, renewable energy, education, infrastructure, all these elements are contributing to having a decent life. So this is where the funding and where the spending will be put into that direction. I'll give you one example about one of those projects. It's a really very amazing project. And the World Bank injected $200 million in order to reshape the area of Qalyubriya Governorate. So in this area, for instance, we have some sort of districts or small villages with informal sector. They are informal, doing some sort of industries. Some of them are really contaminated or producing a pollution. So the World Bank came and injected this money in order to renovate all this place and to make it a more decent life. So creating more jobs based on tech enabled with new technology, eliminating the negative impact of the environment, okay, and having a decent job and decent life for everybody in this place. So this is one example that already took place and it is already started to be implemented in this area. Imagine the same thing happens in each and every spot all over Egypt. Change is coming. Change is the only constant in life. Yet it should be done in a prioritized way or a prioritized manner according to like the national agenda, how this will create more focus and more rigid and more resilient system to lead for the future aspects.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the reasons why Egypt is having a very strong prediction for growth for the year 2022. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Egypt was an exceptional model worldwide last year during the first wave of COVID-19 as it managed to raise its GDP by 3.6%. The World Bank has raised its forecast to Egypt's real GDP growth for 2021 to 5.5%, up from 4.5% predicted in June, before hitting 6% in 2022. According to a report by Standard & Poor's, Egypt's GDP will grow 5.3% in fiscal year 2022 to 23 and a similar figure in the following year. Egypt's GDP is expected to post 7.1 trillion Egyptian pounds in the current fiscal year. This is according to a statement given by the Minister of Finance, Mohammed Mait, whilst he addressed the National Press Authority. Mait said the economic reforms Egypt has been implementing since 2016 are helping the economy attain its targets during this fiscal year, despite the ongoing challenges, which include the coronavirus pandemic, supply chain disruptions, and the rise in shipping costs. In this respect, Minister Might noted the government is aiming to achieve a real GDP growth rate of 5.6% and an initial surplus of 1.5%. He noted the government has set a target to reduce the overall budget deficit to 6.7% of the country's GDP. Might added the government is keen on stabilizing tax policies and has no intention to impose new taxes or increase tax burdens on citizens in the future. The ministry has adopted a comprehensive strategy to upgrade the taxation and customs systems through which the government can maximize the state budget revenues. He also explained Egypt has managed to introduce a pioneer model by applying the e-invoice system, that it has attracted so far about 5,000 companies and uncovered about 3,000 tax evasion cases. He also predicted Egypt will have a fresh economic phase by the end of the current fiscal year, with all ongoing projects to modernize and automate tax and customs systems to be completed and all new technologies integrated into government operations.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Samy. Now, Doctor, you've highlighted that one of the reasons why Egypt is recording this sort of growth and expansion in the economy and the GDP is the technological aspect that may be not just introduced but reintroduced or reimagined to become the new norm for Egyptians. And we've seen a lot of change, especially during the pandemic as well, that everything is becoming online. People are starting to adapt to the credit culture, the banking system, which leads us into the financial inclusion. So part of the informal sector becomes formal. Is this one of the reasons why we are witnessing growth, this sort of adaptation of the Egyptian citizen to a new banking and credit culture?
Definitely. Let me elaborate more about the equation, or how, like a framework for sustainable development growth. Mm-hmm. In order to have a sustainable development growth in any system, we need to have the following components. First, we need to have a basic infrastructure of a new laws, regulations, legislative system. Mm-hmm. So this is the fundamental, this is the foundation of the economical growth. Out of this foundation, we have three columns or three pillars. Mm-hmm. One of those pillars is the economic development. So how you are creating a trust inside out. For people, they see your systems, they have like area of transparency, area of anti-corruption systems, all of these type of economic hotlines, mm-hmm. okay, are addressed. So having this component, the technological development component is the second pillar, and the third pillar is the trade management or trade systems. So mm-hmm. how we can have access to markets. So all these three components together, when they are combined, synchronized, and based on this type of new laws and regulation systems, here we can create what we call the sustainable development growth. And actually this is what have been done for the last number of years in Egypt. Changes in laws and regulations in the industry, in the investment portfolio, even in export and importing places and so on. Introducing the area of quality management systems, the certificate of origins, all these type of initiatives are helped to form this basic infrastructure. Is this enough? Definitely no, because technology is leading a lot. Financial markets is changing day by day. There is a new normal, not anymore the norm, or back to normal. There's no normal anymore. There is a new normal, which is nobody can tell how it will look like, because the people all over the world, they said, okay, there is a new wave, there is a new system. Whenever the people will be vaccinated, then everything will be back to normal. There are some of the introductions. So the economic system right now, we are right now worldwide. We have a global inflation issue right now addressed. Okay, the COP26, as you remember, a few days ago, they were addressing this area of the climate finance and the impact of climate changes on financials and economic systems. So this one, Egypt is taking very good steps forward. Again and again, this is not the end of the story, but every time we need to have like the continuous improvement. We started the journey, it is not yet ended. As for the trade systems, how we can go to international markets, and thanks to the pandemic, we witnessed a lot of exporters exporting vegetables and different type of materials from Egypt, and Egypt actually ranked one of the top classes in different elements to be exported. And then we come to the area of technological development. Technological development, we witnessed that in the ICT and the role of information and communication technologies. We witnessed that into the dimension of establishing a strategy, a national strategy for artificial intelligence. So, and once Egypt announced that, we have been ranked up 55 steps in the competitiveness index for this, the government readiness indicator. Taking into the financial market and financial inclusions, usually we have the terminology we call the technology diffusion. How we feel the technology, the beauty of using the technology without any fears, the digital trust, building the digital trust with everybody so they can deal with buying and selling things over the internet or over the whatever the market is without any fears of losing the money and credential. And actually, thanks to the banks and the policy, the monetary policy and financial policy of the Central Bank of Egypt, they actually were behind this type of new momentum that the banks right now is charged to change their culture, their application depends on the applications. So all these elements are contributing to the financial inclusion by a way or another. And then the utilization of technology. We have the Digital Egypt platform for digital transformation, and a lot of activities, a lot of services right now governed by, conducted by the government are now being conducted electronically.
And do they help the Egyptian economy, these services provided by the government digitally and electronically?
Definitely, definitely, yes. I will give you one small example about the use of the new systems in the government purchases systems. Just to give numbers, when you have this new system for unified purchasing for the government supplies, I'm thinking about supplies like pencils and papers and all of these things, they saved almost 3 billion Egyptian pounds just because we have like a unified centralized purchasing system for the government. You can imagine? So if this is in one element, how about things in the medicine? We have this authority for this part again. How we do this in other disciplines. So having this type of a new digital systems, you will eliminate redundancy at first place, efficacy and efficiency of utilization of resources, mapping the exact need with the exact supply and demand, okay, as well as the digital governance of the system, okay, controlled with key performance indicators, and the last but not least, which is the having an anti-corruption system that will like shut down all resources that may lead into this type of splitting the resources in the wrong direction.
Yes. Well, one thing that you've brought up, and we need to shed more light on it, which is the artificial intelligence. Now we understand, you've explained how digitization and digitalization and electronically generated and powered transactions could help the Egyptian economy. But how does artificial intelligence play a role in boosting the Egyptian economy? What does it mean? What will the AI do for the economic performance? How will AI affect the daily lives and transactions of the Egyptian citizens?
Okay, perfect question. When you talk about artificial intelligence, mainly is the machine will take a decision to provide something for anybody. Okay, so there are some special characteristics for the machine that, as a human being, we don't have. For instance, we need to sleep. The machine will not sleep. Okay, we need some food. The machine does need the food. It needs some sort of maintenance. Okay, this is a very basic, simple analogy to make it like simple to everybody listening to what is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is how the machine is acting, dealing with normal transactions. So in this sense, for instance, I will take one segment and then extrapolate it for the next. The technology-based or tech-based startups or entrepreneurs. For instance, right now there are more than 50 startups dealing with artificial intelligence tools. The beauty of this part, those startups are not just operating in Egypt. They are operating outside Egypt. One of those companies are specialized in chatbots. So chatbots is now needed for anybody who's doing online businesses. So those guys are really very smart. They started 2017. They are just less than 5 years old, but they are now existed in 50 countries all over the world, and they are based in Egypt. So you can imagine how this will impact the posture of Egypt in the era of technological development. So just one company started to do this type of application, smart application, existed in 50 countries all over the world. This is one out of a lot of more than 50 companies again. This is in the startup phase. So how about in the government, in the decision-making mechanisms? Okay, it can give you some sort of scenarios, good analytics, decision-making process will be enhanced, okay? Connecting analytical data, because this right now is the real challenge, how to manipulate and how to manage your data, because data is the money, okay? So for the government to take a decision that we need to open up some place or to close or to put some sort of resources from one place to another, this should be built on data. So artificial intelligence will give you instant analytical and futuristic approach for that. So this can help into accelerating the issue. One of the things that we already saw in the streets, like the new traffic system per se. So right now you can see a lot of newly systems introduced. This is how we can change the behavior or what we call the cognitive behavior of the citizens. So people, they can move, they can have better access to the resources, okay? All of these things are done with a machine in the back end. Again, this machine was designed by you and me, the human being. So therefore, having artificial intelligence, ease of use of doing services, outreach and accessibility, again, reliability in doing the systems, okay? And when we talk about artificial intelligence in medical sector, sky's your limit. From the early diagnostics till the curification, the treatment, even the following up, even if you need to have like a second opinion for a case or something like that. We can do this in telesurgery and telepathology applications as well. So all of these elements, when we put them together, okay, we will need to have a very robust engineering team and very well educated. And this was already in the place of the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. They availed some programs, educational programs, from the very basic elementary intermediate, and even expert level. So we need to create a pool of experts, okay? Raising awareness about the use of these type of things. When we go for the trading system, okay? For instance, if you would like to shop online, so this type of what we call the cognitive behavior, it realizes that I'm good in sports, or like I like music or something like that, so they can offer me some sort of suggestions.
Yes.
Okay, they can give me better deal, better offer if I would like to do some sort of comparative analysis. If I would like to buy a laptop or to buy a car or something like this, so this artificial intelligence tools can give me this quick, instant comparative analysis and give me the right direction to move forward. So a lot of amazing things.
But how far, I mean, it seemed like we started having or taking these baby steps towards a full implementation or understanding the progressive nature of AI within our daily lives and the Egyptian economy. How far are we to reaching this sort of full potential of applying AI in our lives?
Fantastic. Technology diffusion is the key word. So whenever the technology is diffused in everybody, okay, so everybody is dealing with the technology, the devices even, or a software even, though whenever we're reaching this type of maturity, then the AI, at the end of the day, it is a tool. So the last thing you can think of is when this AI tool will emerge in the market. It's all about changing the culture, having the digital culture in our day-to-day lives. We can accept things. We saw in the movies, like the science fiction, people are talking to their car and the watch, or maybe your refrigerator is requesting order from the grocery shop or something like this. These type are like right now existed projects in Egypt. Some of them started actually in Egypt in a way. So whenever we're going to have technology diffusion and technology readiness for that, this needs a lot of application to be developed and implemented by developers. So therefore, there is an excessive need for developers to implement. Therefore, we have the new schools of computer science and artificial intelligence integrated for the last 2 years in order to supply the market with the like the requested candidates that can help in this dimension. By the way, it's a lengthy process. Even different countries, it takes a lot of time for them, years and years, but we are accelerating in our dimension in this way.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, definitely a lot of good reasons for the strong indication of progress and success of the Egyptian economy. And as Dr. Samy mentioned, still the future holds a lot, very much reliant as well on the IT sector. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Nezar Samy, the technology management consultant and economic expert. Dr. Samy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Hani.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.